Food is more than just what's on our plate. It's the places where it's grown, it's the people who grow it, and so much more. Join me, Janice Person, your host, on Grounded by the Farm every other week as we talk about the foods we love. We're in central Ohio, and we went southeast for a while. We're in a town called Carroll. Never been to this part of the country. Did not know what I was in for. But it is a beautiful, lush green, kind of rolling hills. A really great sign. And I rolled up on the driveway of my friend Kristin Root Patterson. And so today we're talking to Kristin. We've got video already. I'm so excited. We went out and saw all of her sheep. And you know, I love lamb. So we're going to be talking about all those things. Lamb, wool, the genetics of these animals. And I want to start with the fact that you go by Local Farm Mom.
Farm Mom.
And you love helping people understand these foods like lamb. That's probably where I've always had your picture.
You've connected me with the sheep. You know, that name came from a leadership training class that I went through. We had to come up with a Twitter handle. And they said, you know, use the name to describe you and like what you want to talk about or share about. And I'm like, well, I live on a farm. I'm a mom. And that was kind of when the whole local foods was starting. So I'm like, Local Farm Mom? I'm like, no, that's not good. And it's kind of just stuck with me, and I'll probably forever have it.
Well, I went with JP Loves Cotton, and now I talk about everything else too, right? So mine may not have held as well as yours. But your family has been farming for a while, and we saw the sheep out in the barn. So tell me a little bit about how you guys got involved in sheep. Is this something your family's done forever?
So my dad loved sheep, and he grew up on a farm, and they never really had sheep. And so he said, someday I'm going to be a sheep farmer. In fact, when he would go to sales and shows, he was Kim Root and family. And they are like, well, where's your family? He says, well, I don't have one, but someday I will. And so it's going to be Kim Root and family. So we had a family prior to having a family in the sheep industry, but he always had a passion for sheep. And so when he and my mom got married, they raised registered Hampshires and showed all over the country. And so when I was about 4 is when we got the horned dorsets, the breed that we have now. But he farmed. He was an ag teacher, corn, beans, wheat, pigs, cattle, really a more traditional livestock and mixed grain farm.
Yeah.
And now we just raise sheep and we make hay.
So you've already used words that some people aren't going to be familiar with. So you talked about 2 different breeds of sheep. Can you help me understand sort of what are some of the differences in breeds? And for me, I'm always interested in how it affects the taste. Mm-hmm. But very important. I also think there's like a difference in wool.
There is. So the Hampshire Sheep is a really cute breed of sheep that has a black face, black legs, and a white body. And you saw Fiona out in the barn, and she would have been a Hampshire breed. And then the horned dorsets came from England, actually. And they are an all-white sheep with horns. So the males, the rams, have horns, and they're thicker. They're more mature horns. And then the females, the ewes, have more dainty horns. But males and females both have horns. And we love the horned dorset breed because we think they're great mothers. They're great milkers to their babies. And they can also lamb twice a year. So that means that we have more lamb to eat because they can have more babies.
I like that. I like that.
And their taste, that is, very important. And I think one of the things we have in the sheep industry, right, is when we say lamb, like sometimes people think baby lambs. And I think they're like, do we really, eat these? No, the lamb chop would be so tiny. So we're eating mature sheep that are about 6 months, 4 to 6 months old. And that flavor component is very important. And so the breeds do have something to do with that, but more or less it's more their feeding, their care, and how old or young that lamb may be for flavor.
And you said like their demeanor and how they take care of children, sheep, right? All kind of comes into it. And when we were in the barn, you have a few different ones here on the farm. Some are just like to play with, it almost sounds like, but you're also doing some crossbreeding.
Right. So the kids have a side meat business. So all of our meat is actually sold through the children. That's their little business. And so they market their meat. And so they've had fun playing around with different breeds that they've always wanted to have. And they cross them with the horned dorset. So when we talk about eating lamb. We have sheep that are here to be mothers, and they're kind of like our pets. Like they have names. We love them. There's no intention for them ever to enter the food chain. So we get more attached to those because we know they're going to be producing the babies that might go into the meat business. And so we do have several different breeds that the children have started to collect. And I love it. My dad does not necessarily love it. He's like, I'd like to see one breed of sheep, but it's fun for the kids that they've gotten to pick some different breeds. Campbell has the Hampshires. Parker has the South Downs, which are adorable. Google a picture of a baby South Down because they have the fuzziest faces.
They do. And I ended up taking lots of photos because they're so cute.
They do. And so they're also a great meat breed. So there are meat breeds and there are wool breeds. We have meat breeds here on the farm.
Okay. But do you still harvest the wool?
We do. And it's very important for the health of the animal because it does get hot and then it does get cold here in Ohio. We have the 4 seasons. Yeah. But we do because once a year, the wool gets very thick and we shear the wool and then we take it to Mid-State Wool Growers, which happens to be like 20 minutes up the road, very close. And our wool would be used more for carpets and rugs. It's a mid-grade medium wool, not a fine wool like you would see someone.
Like a merino.
Yes, like
something.
A merino, a rambouillet, like any of those. Those would be considered fine breeds.
So merino is not just a kind of wool. It's actually the breed of sheep it comes off.
It is, which is very clever when you see merino, on your wool jacket tag, which is a beautiful breed of sheep. Beautiful.
Yeah. And so one of the other things that I just find amazing with wool is that you do classify it for different kinds of uses. Because as a cotton person, I think about that a lot, right? And so I have woolen carpets at my house, which I love the feel on my feet. So I do like the fact that I hadn't really thought about it very much.
Yeah. So because our wool is just okay, it's a great use for the carpets and the rugs. And I think that's one of the fun things about the sheep industry is that nothing goes to waste. That wool is used for multiple different purposes. And, Campbell participates in something called Guys and Gals Lead, where it shows the finished product on the sheep, on the wool on the sheep, and then the finished garment that she would wear or model. So it's the before and the after. And I think it's a fantastic way to really show the versatility of wool.
I'm going to have to take a picture of that because there's a picture of Campbell in that garment that she's got that's like, oh yeah, I'm killing it.
She's modeling. So I think it's a fun connection to consumers too, that, wool is fashionable and it's beautiful. It's beautiful on the sheep, but it's even more beautiful, hanging on the person or garment.
Not that I really don't want to go deep into wool, but right now there's a weird kind of interest in wool, right? Like there's this 100-day dress challenge and things like that because wool is another one of the sustainable fibers.
And so you can do so much with it.
Naturally made, biologically based, so you can do a lot of different things with it, but it's also very just good wearing kind of material, right?
It lasts
like it
forever.
Feels good.
And styles come back. And so all my garments from like the 80s and the 90s are now back in style. So it's like, let's pull it out of the closet and rewear it. So Campbell might be wearing some of those outfits that I wore when I was her age. So
That's awesome.
It's timeless.
It's awesome to think about. So as we were going through the barn, we saw different age sheep, right? So how do you mix that around on the farm? Is that something that changes? Relate
it back to if you have kids or you have puppies and your dog, eats a certain puppy chow when it's a puppy, and then you kind of switch its feed as it grows through life. That's what we do on farms too. So their diet changes, their nutritional needs change. And so they're drinking their mommy's milk, which is why good milkers are so important because we don't want to have to mix up, milk replacer and feed to them. It's best from their mother. And so their mom is providing them with everything they need. And then we add in a little bit of pellets, when they're about 2 weeks old and they get a little more nutrition and then they start nibbling on hay.
You started introducing solid foods.
Yes, solid foods. We went through all the fruits and vegetables, only it comes in the form of a pellet. And so they're getting everything they need. And then as they grow, those nutritional needs change. And some of them, we use the term, this is going to be a new one, easy keeper. Right. Some of us are easier keepers than others. We can we put on weight without eating very much, so we like those sheep that are kind of easy keepers. And so they can just go out on grass and they'll get everything they need in the summertime from the grass. And then there's others that might need a little extra. I don't know anything about that. But they need a little extra.
Somebody may say you're extra now and then, Kristin.
I probably am a little extra. But so they will sometimes get grain. So we base their grouping off of their nutritional needs essentially and how they handle lambing. Do they need a little extra?
Yeah.
Do they not need as much?
And
so it's really kind of a fun thing to think about. And then we also group them by different genetic groups that we want them to be bred to a certain ram. And so we've got a couple different things going on in the barn.
And your barn is broken into segments, right? So I recently saw a dairy barn where they had a maternity barn and then they had another barn. The maternity barn where all the moms were about to have babies, and then they had like birthing pens. Do you have to do some of that?
We will. So we have lambing pens. And so as they're going to lamb, which we can monitor based on, we know when they were bred, but we also watch their udder size. Their udders will fill up, and that's where the milk comes out. Those will get tighter. And so we'll be like, oh, it's time for her to go into the lambing pen, and then she'll give birth in a pen by herself with her lamb, and she'll stay there for a couple days just to make sure she's healthy, the babies are healthy, and then we get to snuggle on them.
And you have that bonding time, and you don't have to worry about her having other animals trying to bond with her child.
That's right, because that happens too. There's always a snitch. Someone always wants to come and drink that milk right off of another mother, and so we have to prevent that just to make sure that baby has a good, or babies, because they have twins or singles or sometimes triplets. That's very normal and common. And so we just want to make sure they have that good jump start before they go out to general population is what we call it.
Yeah. So then your general population, which is so funny because the image that comes to my mind does not involve sheep. General population is something very different to me. It's like a prison.
That's why it could be. Yes. I'm thinking, what are you thinking?
So when you look at your barn, there were a few different pens, and then there's a walkway down the middle. Each pen kind of goes out to its own set of pastures right now, right?
Rotational grazing is really important to us here on the farm. So we want to take care of the environment. We want to take care of our sheep. And then we want to do it in a very sustainable way and easy, because making things easy for farmers is really important. And so we have pastures that are all interconnected that leave the barn, and then we can rotate the sheep through them every day, every 2 days, sometimes even a week. And they go out and they fertilize the pasture field. And when they're done eating it and fertilizing, we move them to the next section.
I love it. Do their little hooves help keep it getting well, right now it's really muddy. You're going to see in the video.
Very wet.
But it also helps incorporate some of that fertility into the soil, I'm betting.
It does. It kind of tramples it down. And then the grass comes right back. So, and that'll all dissipate and disappear, and you won't even see it after a couple of weeks.
Yeah. What kind of grasses do?
So we have a lot of
ruminants,
fescue.
right?
They're ruminants. They can eat
really
anything. They do. So we have fescue. We have some clover mixed in. Sheep love clover. And so a lot of our pastures have clover. And so then we also have alfalfa fields, which the sheep do not graze on, which that might be another topic. They can't graze on alfalfa until we've had a couple hard frosts in the fall. And then they can go out to the alfalfa, but that would be a whole disaster, like nutritional disaster for them. So our pastures are mixed pastures. They're free of weeds. Our pastures could always be better. I think everyone would say pastures could be better, but we have pretty nice pastures, and especially right now, everything's green and lush. And sheep don't like too tall of grass. So after they go in and they graze, we will go in and mow off that grass.
Okay.
And we keep it kind of short, not short like your lawnmower short, but short for us, probably 8 inches or so.
They don't want to go into seed or
they
stuff
do
like
not.
that.
They will eat right around it. They'll just leave everything they don't want, which is why I always say it's great to incorporate sheep in other livestock operations, because like what cattle don't eat, sheep would, and then vice versa. So it's always a nice way to sneak in another species
for sheep.
I know everybody should have a couple of sheep.
I don't think I'm going to have a couple of sheep in St. Louis, but other people
might.
Yes. Other people.
But this is why you have this whole movement for these like baby doll South Downs, because people want to have a couple sheep in their backyard. I don't know. It's a Little strange, but
backyard chickens are
huge.
Still a thing, but I haven't seen many backyard sheep. Only you, Kristin.
When I see one, I'm going to take a video and send it to you.
I love it. So when you start thinking about the cuts of lamb, I can remember when my nephew came home he was staying with me for a summer, and he got a job at a grocery store, and they had lamb, and he was so excited. And I told him to bring home, something for me to cook for dinner. And he asked, can I bring home lamb chops?
Yes.
And he was like so excited because a lot of grocery stores didn't used to carry it, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you were this one happens to have an ethnic flair to it, right? And those markets and maybe high-end markets, lamb is becoming
every day. That's what we want to happen. I think it used to have this like upper echelon, like you couldn't afford it. It was only for people who, were foodies and, or ethnic populations, and they would just go and they would buy the whole lamb and then they would break it down themselves. And so I think we're really seeing a shift, which is exciting in the sheep industry because we want lamb to be eaten not just for special occasion, but for everyday meals. And the kids having this meat business, I think that's what's so exciting because we put our lamb in the market. And people are like, wow, like what can I do with this? And then you can share with them, ground lamb, ground burgers, lamb shoulder, different ways that you can use that shoulder is just like the leg, only it has a little more waste on it because it has a little more fat. So it's a little cheaper, but you're going to have a little more shrinkage and waste from that shoulder. So we love having those conversations. And I love that we have customers that come in and say, I want to have a lamb brisket. I'm like, I'd never had the lamb brisket like cut out. So we use it for different things. And so you see people watching Food Network, food shows, and, wanting these different cuts, which has been really fun to work through with the butcher to get these cuts for our customers. So it's a learning experience for me too.
Typical things have been like rack of lamb.
Mm-hmm.
Lamb chops.
Shanks are very popular.
Yeah.
We even have a customer, and we love to talk about zero waste and recycling on the farm, is that we have a customer who's European and she wants the lamb fat. And I've always said, gross. Like, that's why people don't like lamb. I feel like that flavor, it doesn't cook the same as pork or beef, right? You want to cook it in that juice. She loves it. She grew up with it. So we even have a customer who buys our lamb fat. So all of that gets packaged and then sold to her. And of course, feeding your pets raw food is very important to people. And so we have customers that are taking all the different parts and pieces and using them for something.
I love it. I love it. So tell me, if your family is having a big meal and it's a special occasion, how are you likely to prepare that lamb?
So for us, our favorite would be lamb chops because we love to grill them. We eat leg of lamb or shoulder all the time because you can throw it in the crock pot, salt, pepper, a little garlic, and you're done.
In a busy world.
You're done. And but lamb chops would probably be our favorite thing. And we like them a little thicker, probably about 2 inches. And we're simple. Like we like salt and pepper, and that's really all you have to have, that flavor. We also like the spiced Tonys. I don't know if you're from, you're like a little Creole Cajun. We love that. So that mixes very well on lamb chops too. But if you want to get a little fancier, you can use a little cinnamon and a little cumin. But we love it grilled. Like that would probably be our favorite way to prepare it, or in a cast iron skillet.
Oh, yeah.
Can't go wrong.
You can't go wrong with cast iron or a grill almost.
Oh, and then we start talking about smoked leg of lamb because that's pretty phenomenal.
So can we, before we move on from lamb chops, because I want to know your opinion. So in cooking it, where are we thinking in the temperature range? Because, like people in beef are very specific about.
Yeah, so I think lamb, this is interesting. I think there's a range, and I think it's your preference. So I think overdone lamb is dry. I think that's how it dries out and has, those tendencies. I think the fat can kind of congeal in a way that's not appetizing. Kind of like I relate that to similar like with Wagyu. I think once Wagyu sits, it gets a different flavor, Wagyu beef. So I like mine medium rare.
Okay.
And I don't like it overcooked. And the kids do too, but that's how they've grown up. So, and with any ground product, fully cook it. But we like ours to be really pink. And it's so tender.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest mistake people make with lamb is overcooking.
I think so too.
Or over seasoning. It really speaks for itself.
Yeah.
And, I think it's so easy to cook with. We just need more people to know this.
Okay. So now we can go on to the smoking. If I have an expert in something, somebody who has dealt with this same food over and over again, that's what I love learning about.
Never order lamb well. well done. It's too much.
Yeah.
It just dries out. You get a little texture. And so it's a great point to bring up.
All right. So smoking it.
Oh, it's one of my favorites. We have a Traeger like everybody else, and I like to smoke with cherry wood chips. It just gives it such a good flavor component. You don't even need a fancy rub. I mean, when I'm talking salt and pepper and garlic, I mean, that's really our go-to. And it's just incredible with a raspberry jalapeno, like chipotle sauce or horseradish. We've been talking about horseradish from your last episode. I mean, it's just so, so good.
I like the idea of that. So you're not a big rosemary and mint kind of...
So rosemary's fine. Mint, when I was growing up, the mint jelly was quintessential.
Thing, right?
That was what you did. So I think we've really changed that whole movement. There's nothing wrong with mint. It complements it very nicely, but there's so many other flavor components. And I think that cooking with food and playing around with it, I mean, you cannot go wrong. So you're not ever going to mess it up unless you overcook it. And if you use mint, that's fine. There's just better options.
So what other things on the table really complement lamb?
Well, we are a potato and meat house. So we love mashed potatoes and roasted red skin potatoes. And, rice really complements as well. And we've tried to do a little better of a job in incorporating rice and just, healthier foods. We like butter. Butters makes everything better. But, you think about these things sometime in balance. And so I don't think there's really a side dish that can go wrong. Brussels sprouts, asparagus, all great compliments.
Especially those Brussels sprouts with like the olive oil and the bacon. And
the onion. And
yeah.
I even eat Brussels sprouts for breakfast. You can shred them and then they look kind of like hash browns and they're delicious. Balsamic. So good.
I wish I knew you liked to cook.
Oh, I love to cook. I love it. We'll get together and cook another time.
I know that you like to cook. I've always known you like to cook. So in the ground meats family, so I think this is really interesting to me, is ground meat is more common, is more popular for people than it used to be. And I can't help but wonder, with the ground lamb we were talking about, I like ground pork, I like ground beef. Where does ground lamb sort of fit in that world?
Yeah, I think that it fits in anywhere. So Campbell just made lamb meatballs, which is fantastic. I make them just like I make my regular meatballs. I just substitute lamb. Gyro meat, of course, is lamb. Usually, traditionally, would be all lamb products, but some mix with beef and pork. So if you want to be an introductory lamb eater, I say mix it with another protein. Like if you're going to make a meatloaf, make it with pork or beef and then add in your lamb and give it a flavor taste to see if you like it. You mix it in. It's a really easy way to do it. If you want to go gradual, we make meatloaf with lamb. I mean, to us, we grew up eating lamb burgers. So make a lamb burger, throw it on the grill. And I think there's all different kinds of, I don't know, it kind of ups your game a little bit, just mixing the flavors together. We make, spaghetti with, I guess this is another thing too. Like we grew up in a house where you just cook your ground meat and then we don't make meatballs for spaghetti. So we'd have ground lamb and a tomato sauce for spaghetti. So anywhere you think probably the most comparable would be beef, just use lamb instead.
And part of that is they're both red meats, right? And they're both from ruminants.
Yes. Very similar.
Which is very, because sheep don't look anything like cows.
They do. They're much smaller. They're much gentler on the pastures. If we had cattle with all this mud here, I mean, we have friends that have cattle and the kids have a couple there. It's a mud mess. Like it's a whole different level.
Yeah.
I'm glad they're not here.
Yeah. As you look at your pasture, there's a few places where you can tell that's where the sheep walk.
They have the sheep train. They just kind of follow each other in, follow each other out. We don't dare leave the path.
But then they walk into the grass a little bit
and then they're
to
everywhere
eat and everything, right? But going in and out, they like their
very
habits.
Interesting. They do.
They typically are like a herding animal. Like they typically like to move in a herd. They like that comfort of safety.
They do. So you always say, like, for kids who take 4-H projects, and you really need a couple because they do better when they have a companion.
Yeah.
And so the sheep, they do like to be in herds and little clusters, or if you're out west, big bands of sheep. But they definitely, one starts to run or one, then they'll all start to go. Like what's making us move in that direction? So they're very intelligent, but they're not.
Yeah.
They can make some poor decisions.
I love it. I love it. And you have a dog that works with them.
Joey, our Great Pyrenees Sheepdog. We actually have two, one here on this farm, and he is their guardian companion. Like, he goes out and patrols the pasture fields. He knows what's normal. I mean, he's not trained. He was just born in a barn. He was actually born with goats, not sheep. And he learned from his mother. And then he goes out and he knows, his bark is what pushes those coyotes and predators away. He would get aggressive if needed, but that's not really what they're for. His job is his bark at night, pushes those coyotes away, and fingers crossed he keeps everything safe.
I love it. I love it. And he seems pretty chill in the barn.
He is so mellow. Like, he just, like, I've been up all night. Like, this is, I work the night shift. Like, I'm supposed to be taking a nap right now and you're waking me up. They are a wonderful breed of dog. So smart, yet they don't want to be trained. Like, they just want to do what their instinct is.
Yeah.
Anytime someone says, I want one as a pet, I'm like, they are the best pets if you live on a lot of ground, because they can get out and they can be a nuisance. If you've ever had or known someone with a Great Pyrenees, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But they are phenomenal animals.
Well, we showed pictures and video of Bo and at Sugarwater Manor when we talked to Dana. She lives in Maryland on the Eastern Shore.
Very beautiful.
And she has goats and lots of other things. Gosh knows what she has this week. But she has a lot of goats, and she has two Pyrenees that hang out with them, and they're brother and sister.
I love them. I had to wait 31 years to get a Great Pyrenees because my dad would never let us have one. And so when we went to get our puppy, my mom went too, and that's how they ended up with Joey. And I can't imagine not having one. Like, I've loved them my whole life, so I'm very glad to have one.
They are not apartment dogs.
They are not. They're bigger than your apartment in most cases.
Yeah.
Joey's about 175 pounds. He's a big boy.
Wow. That's amazing.
He's a big creature.
One of the things we mentioned, let's go back to the food part of this for a few minutes, because you mentioned different things that you might serve with it in terms of jams and jellies and types of things.
Yes.
Talk to me about that. So is it something where you can pair it with like the sweet or the savory and all of those kind of things?
You can. I think more when you're making, I always think, how do you want your plate to look, first of all? So lamb is going to look like a steak. It's going to cut very similarly. And then, really, do you want a starch or do you want something a little more healthy? I mean, in my book, you can never go wrong with a mashed potato because I love it, but I also like risotto, and it looks really pretty on a risotto too. I just love food. But we like vegetables as well. So, I mean, green beans, like that's probably the most common meal we would eat would be lamb chops, green beans, mashed potatoes, and then like a piece of bread with butter. Like, we're pretty basic. But, you can make it fancy too. And I think that's the fun thing about lamb. We can make that raspberry jalapeno chipotle sauce if we want to, and we can make it look fancy. And, we've talked about horseradish. I mean, that's phenomenal with it too. So there's all kinds of sauces and flavors. And that's part of the learning experience, just testing and seeing what you like, what your flavor components are, and really what you like best.
I know you used to blog a little bit more as Local Farm Mom. But do you have some of those kind of tips and recipes on your site?
I do. So we have some lamb recipes at localfarmmom.com, and easy ones. Like, there's some crock pot cookers, there's some lamb chop recipes, and then all kinds of sweet things too. But lots of side dishes that really complement. A scalloped potato, honestly, is really good with lamb too. It's almost lunchtime. I'm hungry.
I was going to say, I'm getting hungrier as we speak too, right? It's so hungry.
But then you think about the basic burger. I mean, you can go baked beans and chips. I mean, there's really no limitation to how fancy or how casual it can be. And I think as a sheep farmer, that's what I want people to know. I want people to want to try lamb. And if they want something that's a little more cost effective, go the ground lamb route, and you can turn it into something fancy, or you can have a lamb burger and be equally as good.
Yeah. Well, I love the fact that you have so many different choices with it, because seriously, growing up, lamb wasn't something that typically was in the grocery store in my neighborhood, right? Like, the neighborhood grocery didn't have it where I lived. You would have to probably go to a meat shop, which I love butcher shops, Totally.
Yeah.
And
but it was
now-
harder to
and
come
now
by.
Now they've become so much more accessible and so much easier to go to and find good
Very
places.
much so. You know, we shop at Costco like most, or Sam's Club like most other people, and there's lamb there. I always say, eat lamb, wear wool. I love it. I'm a little biased to American lamb, just being an American sheep farmer, but there are other countries that have lamb that is wonderful. I think ours tastes a little different. So when we get into the flavor components, I think that American lamb does taste different than Australian or New Zealand lamb. It's great. We could not have a supply without those countries.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm a local sheep farmer and I like American lamb, and, you know, that's kind of something that's important to me.
Yeah. Do you think the flavor differences and stuff, is that mainly because of different breeds of sheep or?
Breeds, and then I think it's grass, and then I think it's age. We didn't talk about age too much, but that age of that sheep is kind of important for us. We don't want to eat anything that's over 6 months old. You know, our lambs will most often go to the butcher about 5 months old, 4 months old sometimes, just depending on how they've grown. And that younger lamb has a tender flavor, and it's just not as strong. So when people tell me they don't like lamb, I'm like, oh, you've probably, you know, usually it's an older generation and they've probably had mutton, whether it be from like a war a long time ago. Like my grandpa would never eat lamb. He's like, gross. We ate lamb out of a can. Like I'm never eating it again. And so, you know, I think we don't have as many, you know, as many people that are eating, you know, raising lamb that's older.
I was going to say that World War II era has really impacted a lot of people's perceptions.
It has, because then they just told their kids and their kids told their kids. And now this new generation is like, oh, we're going to give it a try.
Yeah.
Because this generation like wants to eat everything. And I love it. Like even rabbits, they're like, ooh, rabbits.
So that's so funny because we saw a couple of rabbits, your kids show rabbits, right? And the idea that you show rabbits, we're going to have to show pictures of these because I don't know what kind of turtleneck action or whatever that was, cow neck.
The dewlap. That's where they pull all the fur for their nest.
It is so strange. That breed is something unique. I hadn't seen that one before. But having sustainable meats and meats from smaller breeds and things like that is something that people are really into. And I can remember having at a James Beard event in New York, and they were serving goat and rabbit. And when I talked to the chef, she was really excited to be offering that. And she goes, but a lot of people don't eat rabbit. And I went, well, I have this recipe for rabbit enchiladas. And she was like so excited that I actually had a recipe that I could speak to.
I need to do one. That's inspiring me.
So do you have rabbit recipes?
I don't, but now I'm going to. And a rabbit enchilada would be fantastic to try. We were at a restaurant in Cleveland, and the waitress was really fun. We were going to a little musical show, and so she was trying to get us through the meal, and she knew we were on a time frame, and she said something about rabbit ravioli, but it came out, and so someone's like, she must have like mispronounced rabbit ravioli. Like she wouldn't have rabbit. And I'm like, oh, I bet she does. Like this is a nice restaurant in Cleveland. And I'm like, ma'am, is it rabbit in the ravioli? And she's like, oh yes, it's delicious. I'm like, that's what I'm going to have. So everyone, my city friends were like, I've never had rabbit. And then they all wanted to try it. And it's delicious.
And you needed to order 2 plates.
Right. Because then they ate all my
ravioli
food.
Entree is a small entree.
It is. There was like 3 raviolis. So they shared their food with me too. But I loved that it was there. And so I just think eating all these different, you know, foods is really exciting that it's coming to this next generation.
Yeah. And it's kind of neat that now farmers that are doing this in these other markets also have a chance to really participate in the markets differently. So it's not only about finding the butchers that serve the ethnic market. Mm-hmm. I love the ethnic market, and the Mediterranean store in Memphis is where I first got to know lamb as something I could cook instead of get at restaurants. Right. Because it was years ago before it was available everywhere. And it's like, oh, but you can get lamb there. Oh,
let's go. Yeah.
I'm going to have to try it. Right. But it can be intimidating to try a new product, a new kind of meat and stuff for the first time. So,
and let's be honest, it's a little expensive. And so I think the fear is there. If I mess it up, I've just messed up, you know, $60 worth of lamb chops. And it's not like, you know, a pound of ground meat. So that's why I say, like, ground lamb, there's so much you can do. Make a burger. You cannot go wrong on a burger.
Yeah.
And then play around with it. But I think, you know, our food is on the rise for multiple reasons. And I think making local food choices is really important to people. And I'm just excited that they want to give it a try. And again, don't overcook salt, pepper, and garlic. That's all you need to know with lamb.
I was going to say, I love that you make it simple.
And it's good. It's not even like you're like just like being the cheapy or fast way. I mean, it's good that way.
Now tell me, when we're looking at what it brings to you nutritionally.
Very healthy. Some would say it's healthier than beef. I don't ever like to compare it to another commodity because I love all the commodities.
It's good in iron?
It's good in iron. It's in vitamin B, riboflavin, all those different things. And so it's nutritious. And, it is a pretty lean meat. And when you're looking at lamb, I think one of the things to keep in mind is that you're going to see a little bit of finish, which we call, it's a nicer word for fat.
Around the outside.
She's well finished is what we like to say. So you're going to see a little bit of the fat on there. And so in most cases, fat adds flavor. So you want that fat to be there, but you don't want too much in lamb. So sometimes if you're not getting it from a butcher, I always like to say take off a little of that excess fat because, it's not like beef and we want it to cook in the juices. You don't really want that with lamb. And so with lamb, it's a little bit different, but lamb is pretty lean. And so you're not going to see the same amount of fat.
Marbling and
you're not going to see marbling through it. You will a little bit, but not like a steak.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that covers all the questions I had in my head. Is there anything that people always ask you about?
So usually people say to us, and if you watch the video, you raise goats, you're a goat farmer because our sheep have horns. And I think because they see the horns, they automatically assume we raise goats, not sheep. So that's the number one thing when someone comes and sees, they're like, oh, you raise goats. I'm like, no, we raise sheep, but goats are great too, but we don't have any. So that's probably the number one thing that people always, when they see it, that's what they think.
That's kind of like all black and white cows.
Our dairy cows, same concept.
It's Holsteins, but they may be used for dairy and they may be used for
beef. Right.
Right. So horned animals may not all be goats.
That's right. And not all sheep are just for wool or for meat. The horned dorset is a very dual purpose breed is what we say. So they produce an okay wool for carpet, but they also produce a really nice carcass for that lamb chop or that leg of lamb.
Awesome. I wish... Is the restaurant locally going to have some lamb on the menu? If not, I may have to get some this weekend.
And we might have some in the freezer you can take with you.
Thanks so much for visiting with me, Kristin. I really did enjoy this conversation. And I'm going to make sure I put in links and people are going to want to watch some of the video because I think you've got such beautiful animals. And I'm always amazed, like, the rams, the way their horns wrap around.
They're really majestic.
They are beautiful animals. And they were obviously having a good time in the barn, checking us out.
They're very curious.
Exactly.
They know it's a new person. They know I feed them. They're like, who is she?
I'm not sure about that one. All right, Kristin, thanks so much.
Thank you.
As you can tell, I had a great time at Kristin's, and I am still amazed at how beautiful her sheep and how different some of them look. So I hope you guys take a chance to look at the videos. They're on groundedbythefarm.com. Also, check out what she's got going on. Her website again is localfarmmom.com. And feel free to invite friends over, fix some lamb, whether that's meatballs, kebabs, chops, whatever it is, and have a great meal. I know I am hungry for lamb at this point. Don't forget to look for us online wherever you enjoy social media. We're probably there. Our email is groundedbythefarm@gmail.com. And we will talk to you again in 2 weeks.